Hello and welcome to the last Micro Live of the present series. In today's programme, we'll be comparing the speed and the power of some of the latest micros.
We look at a triumph of British technology, the Transputer, a chip that will put the power of a supercomputer right on your desk.
And a new fast jet simulator game for 2 players that you play using 2 micros. But before all that, you've probably read about the problems with the computer systems on the new Mark III Nimrod project to build an airborne early warning system. Well, so far it's cost more than £1 billion, and cynics are saying that the government should cut its losses and buy the American AWACS aircraft that's been operational for some years. Well, all this bad publicity has been rubbing off on the Mark III's close cousin, the Mark II Nimrod. The Mark II has more than 100 computer systems on board, and they all work.
Lieutenant Bill Martin, attached from the US Navy, and today captain of Hunter-Killer Nimrod, X-Ray Victor 229.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Today's mission is to search for an unknown submarine contact in the vicinity of Area Alpha on your screen. Our primary sensor will be passive sonobuoys augmented by radar. The aircraft we have today is X-Ray Victor 229. It's on Bay 42. It has 50,000 pounds of fuel, standard sonobuoy load, and no limitations to affect us.
All the information for the briefing comes from this computer, the mission support system, which also enables entire flights to be reviewed from data captured on the aircraft. The officer in charge is Squadron Leader Dick Tewson.
The system holds information on the Nimrod performance and meteorology, so we can in fact do fuel and flight planning before the sortie takes off. The system is being continually updated with intelligence information, so we can in fact produce a full plot of any potential enemy.
The enemy, Warsaw-packed submarines and ships, are in red, and the computer stores full data about each vessel. NATO forces are in blue.
The system again stores oceanographic information, so can tell us the likely performance of our sonobuoys, for instance, in any particular area of the ocean.
That concludes our brief, gentlemen. If there's no questions, we'll take transport now, and engine starts in 20 minutes.
On the right are the aircraft's WETs, the nickname given to the operators who monitor the acoustic buoys. Navigation is assisted by a computer which tracks a light arrow across the chart showing the aircraft's position. X-Ray Victor 229 is heading for an area where intelligence reports suggest Soviet submarine activity. The presence of a submarine will be detected by acoustic buoys like this one. They can be remotely controlled by onboard computers and can pick up everything that makes a noise underwater, from a shrimp to a nuclear submarine. They're positioned in the sea with this retro launcher. The impact inflates the conical top which houses the aerial, keeping it above water. A field of buoys is laid. The impact also turns on the transmitter, and a hydrophone, an underwater microphone, is lowered. Support for this mission is supplied by 810 Squadron, Naval Air Service, a helicopter squadron operating from onboard Royal Fleet Auxiliary Engadine. The helicopters have a similar computer technology to the Nimrod, but have an ability to hover directly over a contact. As the submarine approaches, its noise is picked up by the submerged hydrophones and sent back to the aircraft. The acoustic spectrum picked up by the hydrophones is analysed by the computer systems on board the aircraft, printed on the table plotters, and displayed on the screens. This is a test signal used to align the screens to ensure the correct calibration of the equipment. We were not allowed to film a real display. That's top secret. But here's the kind of image that's produced. Each dark vertical band represents a frequency, and that particular combination of frequencies is unique, a fingerprint identifying a vessel beyond doubt. A computer check against a library of known sound patterns identifies this contact as hostile. It's to be attacked.
Roger, stand by 4-buoy barrier, open 230, initial heading.
Steady 230.
And 4-buoy, prepare 4-buoy barrier. Roger, ready 4-buoy barrier. Check on your channels. Channels are clear, settings 3. Roger, confirm Mayflowers 13151719. Confirm. Roger. We are clear radar, confirm clear visual.
Clear visual.
Roger.
Captain Acoustics, we have a submarine contact on low-foul 13, classified hostile.
We are hot on hostile submarine contact, Maypole 13.
And the target is showing southwest of the sonobuoy, and a range about 5,000 yards, tracking southerly.
Sonar contact, a bearing 030, range.
Roger, flash. This is Bravo 3, Bravo, sonar contact 030. Stand by info tank.
By contact, classified hostile submarine. Date and time 1434. Contact tracking southeasterly, speed slow.
Stand by, attacking. Attacking now.
Bravo 0 kilo, torpedo away.
Loud underwater explosion.
In fact, there was no explosion, nor even a submarine. It was all a computer simulation. The sound of a Soviet sub created by a computer on board the helicopter support ship Engadine. And this is it, the Shaker. The sound of a sub at a fraction of the cost.
And from Nimrods to Phantoms. This is a new version of a game called Phantom Combat. It was written by Nick Brown and Roger Selby. Roger, first of all, tell me a bit about the game and why the two joysticks?
Well, this joystick here is operating as a conventional joystick. This one here is just operating as a thrust lever. But you can see the reaction of the outside world there above the instrument panel.
Fairly sensitive. But that, in fact, isn't the main difference between this and another flight simulator game, is it?
The real difference here is that we've actually linked these two computers together so that effectively we have two aircraft flying in the same airspace.
Now, by that, do you mean we should be able to see the plane you're flying on Nick's screen?
That's right, yes. And if you look over there I am.
Yeah.
And I'll just do a roll to the right to prove it.
Lovely three-dimensional graphics there.
I'll just do a roll to the left.
Yeah.
There we are.
Lovely. Now, is it just one program that's working all of this?
No, it's really two programs, and they're sort of meshed together like gear wheels, and this lead between the two is the data interchange between the two programs.
So, by the same token, we should be able to see Nick's plane coming onto your screen if he's going to go ahead of you, yes?
That's right,
yes. I'm just coming through now, so you should see me
swooping
appear.
under or over?
He should be just coming underneath any second now. There he is.
Yep.
Going into the distance.
Oh, what are you doing there?
I'm just firing at him.
That's very aggressive of you. And I hope you don't carry on like that when you're doing your day job.
My day job?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Captain.
Yes, that's right. I'm a captain with British Airways on TriStars.
Yeah. Well, no wonder
I don't normally do this when I'm flying my passengers around.
It would be the end of in-flight dinners and things, wouldn't
That's right.
And what about you, Nick? Have you got any flight experience?
Yes, I used to work in simulation on a Tornado project, so I spent a lot of time in cockpits, but not a lot of time in the air.
Right, but tell me about the graphics, the exterior graphics. How do these compare with the sort of graphics you get in a professional flight simulator?
Yes, professional flight simulator has a lot of large hardware processors to perform the visual calculations. So in this, we have to sort of take a shortcut, if you want, to produce
very sparse, isn't it?
That's right, a stylized view. On the other hand, we get a very rapid response with the aircraft manoeuvring by sacrificing some of the ground detail outside.
I notice also very smooth movement as well, which adds to that feeling of realism.
That's very important. We try to capture the sort of realism from the pilot's point of view in this program.
What do you reckon, Roger? Realism from the pilot's seat?
Yes, it's pretty realistic. Of course, you're not getting all the feedback, the seat of the pants feeling, but the actual way the outside world is moving and the instruments respond is very good indeed.
You've got him right in your sights. Oh no, he's out of your sights again.
You think I should shoot at him?
Yeah, go on.
Let's have a go.
It's tricky stuff. I mean, that's my one complaint. As a beginner, it's very difficult. I couldn't keep it off the landing strip very long, kept crashing.
Yes, well, we cater that. We have a sort of beginner's mode, but it is still really a flight simulation experts program. It's a computer buffs, simulator buffs program, really.
And that's who it's been written for?
Exactly.
Right. Which micros have you written for?
Well, it's for the BBC, all the BBC series, any combination. And it's really what simulator buffs have been asking for years.
And when will it be available?
About 2 weeks' time.
And how much will it cost?
$19.95.
And does that include this data link?
Including the hardware link.
Right,
yes.
OK. Well, you've been flying very helpfully together so far, but of course this is really meant to go into hard combat, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
So,
right, I'm
flying
going to
against
get it
each
now.
other? Oh, here we go. I'll get out the way, I think. Take it away.
Here we go. No. Where are you, Nick?
You've almost shot me down.
I'm turning for you.
Buy a new car, it's easy to tell how powerful it is. You can look at figures like the time it takes to accelerate to 60 or the top speed. But with computers, it's more difficult. One way of measuring the power of a computer is with the so-called benchmarks, such as those published by PCW magazine. So, John Coll, what are benchmarks?
Well, benchmarks are just computer programs, like this one, which you can run on a range of different computers. This one's just a few lines of BASIC. It's a basic benchmark. And all it does is print an S, set K to 0, add 1 to K, and if K is less than 1,000, then it goes round again. So quite
it's
simple.
Just counting to 1,000, in fact. But I noticed straight away that you could easily speed that up. For example, these could be integer variables, you could lose the goto, you could put multiple commands on one line and so on.
We'll put the goto in especially for you, of course.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, but the point is, if you changed the program and optimised it for each computer, we'd really be testing your ability to write a good program. And we don't want to test that. What we want to do is to test how well the computer works. So we use exactly the same program with all its deficiencies, as you rightly say, on all the machines. That way we compare the machines, not you.
So it's a shoddy program. Who wrote it?
Thanks. Well, I put these benchmarks together back in '77. Actually, I pinched most of them from another magazine.
It all comes out now.
Anyway, yes.
So you did all those PCW benchmarks, or you collected them?
Yes.
Right. Well, let's see this one in all its glory running.
Right, I have a stopwatch here. If I can hold it very still and type run and start the watch together, we'll see how long this one takes. Wait for the E, stop, and that's about 2.7 seconds.
Right. Now, first question, obviously, why are you using a stopwatch when there's an internal clock?
Well, there's an internal clock on this machine, but there isn't on other machines, and particularly when we wrote this thing, there weren't internal clocks on any of them. If you want the program to run on all the machines, you can't afford to use a clock. So this program, as is, will run on lots of machines.
But the stopwatch isn't terribly accurate, is it?
Certainly not the way I did it just then, no. But no, it isn't. But actually, if you're timing... This one's only 2.7 and the stopwatch isn't very good. Normally, you're timing longer things and it's OK. But even with this one, if you run it 3 or 4 times, it's OK.
So there are many other benchmarks?
Yes, there are. I've got a more complicated one here. Another one in the series, benchmark 7. This has got some of the same elements. K equals 0. From the old program, and if K is less than 1,000, that's from the previous program. But there are other lines in, like this one here, dim M5, that's dimensioning an array. There's some really wild arithmetic here. A equals K divided by 2 times 3 plus 4 minus 5. You know,
higher mathematics.
Pretty stretching stuff. And a go sub here, go sub 230, which just does a return.
All the usual things you might want to do in BASIC.
Right.
I see. But of course, there's nothing like the procedures that are exclusively BBC Micro.
Exactly.
I do notice this, though. This is BBC Basic, isn't it? Colour 129, sound 1, minus 15,
The producer, God bless him, insisted that we put that in, turn the screen red. So we've got a specific line in each of these machines. Now, we've actually got 4 machines here. At the far end, we've got a Commodore Amiga with a program in, and we've got a Sinclair Spectrum Plus, and we've got an Atari 520 ST, and here we've got a BBC Master System. They've all got the same program in. We'd like to run them. I think if we get Lesley, come on in on that one, please, and Mac on the Spectrum.
Should point out that's a Spectrum 128, not the Spectrum Plus. There is a difference.
Yes.
OK, are we ready? 3.
No.
We're not.
No.
No.
We're
Yes,
live.
I am now.
3, 2, 1, go.
Right.
Now, mine hasn't run. My function key has collapsed on me, which just goes to prove it is live. Now, at the moment, we've got 4 different micros. They've got 4 different processors. Obviously, we're going to get quite a span.
Amiga's gone. Amiga's gone.
How long was that?
And it was 14 seconds, Fred.
Right. Well, I happen to know that this one would have been, if I got it right, it would have been 17 seconds.
And in rehearsals, this one did it in 21 and a squirt seconds
What's
as well.
it done now?
22.
Right, OK. So what about you, Mac? How are you getting
Spectrum,
on?
very reliably, calculating it on very deliberately. It's going to win in the end.
In the end.
tortoise.
Right, excellent. So, look, why did the Amiga win? Was that because it's a 16-bit?
Well, the benchmark tests various things. Yes, it's 16-bit, but really what it tests is how good the basic interpreter is, or that's another factor. And in many ways, that's testing how good the programmer was who wrote the basic interpreter.
Right.
So it's really testing several factors.
But there's a whole lot of things it's not testing at all.
Exactly. Now, the dear old Spectrum is a bit slow on this benchmark, but it's got some darn good graphics, and you get some assembly language games, which are first rate. So it doesn't test the graphics, it doesn't test the disk drives, how good the keyboard is, what the value for money is. All those things are missed out on this benchmark. You've got other benchmarks for those things.
Of course, it would be possible to put it together on micro.
There goes the Spectrum.
Ah, excellent.
77 seconds.
77
Reliably,
seconds.
I might assure you.
Right. Well, actually, that is a bit faster. That we're actually operating that in 48K mode, because we discovered earlier today that if you run that in 128 mode, it takes, I think, 107 seconds, which is about 30-odd% slower than that. Very strange. It would be possible, wouldn't it, to put together a micro which just performed well on benchmarks and nothing else?
Yes, it wouldn't be much good for that. The other thing you can do is to choose your benchmarks very carefully by each machine. So when you're promoting a particular machine, you show off the benchmarks that it works very well at. And that's something we see repeatedly in the magazines, of course.
So does that mean we're not really to take them too seriously?
Yes, very much so. Just one more factor, to consider, but don't take them too seriously.
So which of all the benchmarks is the best one?
Well, Max said to me during rehearsals, very good advice. It's really to run the program that you actually want to run in real life. That's the best benchmark on the whole thing.
Right. Thank you very much, John. Benchmarks, just a rule of thumb. One of the factors that affects performance of a micro is, of course, the speed of its processor. But there's a limit to how fast you can make a single processor work. That's true even for big minis and mainframes. Freff has been to see a research project at Columbia University in New York.
This is the inside of a VAX 11750, one of the most popular mini-computers in the entire world. And while it looks terribly complicated, it's actually based on a very simple idea. A processor and some memory linked by a single data stream. That's a structure known as a von Neumann machine, and it's pretty much the way every computer in the world is built, including the micro you have at home. But they're not all like that. Meet a non-von Neumann machine, non-von 1, built here at Columbia University. It ran for the first time in January of 1985. Looks a lot simpler inside, and that's because it's based on a totally different type of computer architecture called parallel processing.
Parallel processing is an attempt to get round what's called the von Neumann bottleneck. Modern transistors, the calculating part of the computer, can perform quite complicated functions in a billionth of a second, but it could take 10 times longer for the result to be passed along the wires, even though it travels at half the speed of light. Of course, one answer is to make the wires shorter.
Well, there's one critical problem with that, and that is heat. These elements that we now use that get these superb switching speeds also tend to dissipate a tremendous amount of energy. And when you compound that by cramming them all into a tiny amount of space, you can wind up with so much heat generated that unless you're very clever about the way you design your refrigeration system to go along with the raw machine, you wind up heating up those chips to the point where they don't work anymore. It turns out that silicon has a fairly narrow operating range of temperatures, and very quickly you wind up with something too hot to be practical. So in fact, the latest supercomputers really are very small, very highly efficient refrigerators.
The non-von answer relies on the fact that the processors, the chips containing the transistors, are now the cheapest part of many computers.
The machine that we're building right now, the non-von supercomputer, has a very large number of processors, each of which, in fact, is comparable to a small personal computer of the sort you might have at home. One important difference is that we have a lot more of them, each of whom can get instructions from the outside and have a little bit of local memory to store, say, a data element at a time and then process it independent of what anyone else is doing.
This independent processing, or processing in parallel, means that a problem can be broken into a number of components, each of which is solved at the same time and therefore faster. But there are some fundamental problems with this approach.
Probably the single most important one is communication. How do we get a machine designed in such a way that these different processors can talk to each other all at the same time and effectively and coordinate their execution of all these different pieces of the problem? That's the single hardest problem.
Connecting even a few processors together so that they can all talk to each other soon becomes unmanageable. So in non-Von, the processors are organized in several different ways.
One of the key structures is what we call a binary tree, which is something that starts out with one processor up at the top that has two children, as we call them. Each of those have two children, and so on down to the bottom.
At present, non-Von has only 64 processors, each on a separate chip. But the most recent development here is to put 8 processors configured in a tree format on a single chip. And eventually, they hope to have up to 1 million processors in future machines.
It's very exciting. The raw figures we get are absolutely astounding in terms of the amount of computational bang that you get for the buck. I don't know if that's an English expression, but what you get in terms of cost performance. But on the other hand, the basic problem that people may have is that if they got used to programming in Fortran or in C or in Pascal or a language like that, they may find the kinds of techniques that we use to be very foreign.
The non-Von uses a parallel version of the programming language Lisp, and some types of calculations can be speeded up 100-fold.
Suppose we had a business and we were trying to raise the salary of everybody in the sales department by 10%, but not raising anybody else's salary. We would store each employee record in a separate processor, and then there would be a series of instructions, each of which would be executed simultaneously by all of the different processing elements, but on their own employee record. That might say something like this. You could start by saying, take a look inside your department field. If it's not equal to sales, then turn yourself off temporarily and don't listen to what I'm about to say. Then the next set of instructions would say, multiply your salary field by 1.1. And at the end of that set of instructions, all of the salesmen would have their raises. And then we send out another single instruction which says, now everybody wake up and start listening again. So that's a typical way that in a short fixed amount of time, all of those different processors have done something to their individual memory elements.
Non-Von is the culmination of 5 years' work here at Columbia University, but this is not the only place that parallel processing is being explored. In a number of schools around the country, alternative approaches are being experimented with, and more than one company is set to release an actual commercial parallel processing computer. The one thing that all the creators of these different approaches believe in common is that their machines are the machines of the future.
Well, Columbia University's non-Von may eventually use up to 1 million 8-bit processors. Well, an alternative approach has been adopted by the Bristol-based chip manufacturer Inmos. They've developed a new device that they call the Transputer, a single piece of silicon with a powerful 32-bit processor, its own memory, and the built-in ability to link directly to other transputers. Phil Atkin has written some demonstration software for the Transputer. Phil, I really like your butterflies here. What are they showing?
It's a very simple demonstration, actually, just showing a pair of transputers talking to each other. We've got one transputer generating the images on this screen, one transputer generating the images on this screen. It's not that simple, though. One of the transputers is generating a butterfly, which is flying between the screens, so that data is being transferred from one transputer to the other.
It's the blue one. There it goes. It's just switched
yeah.
over. But that doesn't seem to be showing much more than we're seeing on those two BBC micros.
It's not. We're using about 1% of the transputer's total resource. It's simply a demonstration of concurrency communication.
Now, can you buy this transputer today?
You can indeed. You can buy this board, which will plug straight into your IBM PC. Here's the transputer, 2 megabytes of memory and interface logic to connect from the transputer to the IBM PC.
That's 2 megabytes of memory. How fast is it?
That's about 10 MIPS.
That's about 10 times faster than the ordinary IBM A2, which is the fastest IBM PC.
That's right. You can plug 5 of these into the AT, in fact, giving you 50 MIPS.
50 MIPS, I can't believe it. How much is really usable?
45, 46 is pretty good.
That's very impressive. How do you program it? What languages are you using?
Fortran, C, Pascal and Occam.
Occam? What is Occam?
That's the language we developed at Inmos to program multi-transputer systems.
Well, we used to Pascal, we used to C and Fortran. Why do we need another language, Occam?
Well, you can program a single transputer in C, Pascal, but bind the entire system together in Occam to create a multi-transputer environment.
Is it difficult to learn?
It's not difficult at all, in fact.
Good. Well, I'll come back to you later, Phil. We've also been joined by the marketing manager of Inmos. Welcome. Tell me, Chris, how much is it going to cost?
The particular board that we've just seen there, Mac, sells for £2,900, but for you, £5,000.
Oh, that's a real bargain. What about the chip itself?
The chip at the moment is selling for £420, but we expected that price, as with all semiconductor devices, to fall to around £50 over the next couple of years.
So that seems to be a good reason why I shouldn't buy one for 2 years?
Only if you want your competitors to get ahead of you, Mac.
So I should buy one now and really get to know how to use it?
Absolutely.
Do I get a copy of Occam with it? Does that come free?
You buy the Occam at a slightly additional price, the compiler and that for the AT all come together.
And I suppose I've got to pay twice as much for the Occam as anybody else.
Indeed.
Thank you very much. Tell me, how do you envisage it being used? What's the market for?
There are many applications for the transputer that we're being designed in today, right from supercomputers through CAD workstations down to process control applications. One particular application that it's being designed into at the moment is the fingerprint project, which is being developed for the Home Office. In that system, the system takes and codes somebody's fingerprint and generates a 1 kilobyte image of that fingerprint. This is then distributed onto an array of over 1,100 transputers.
So that the actual image of the fingerprint is put in the memory inside the transputer itself?
Each transputer has a copy of that, and then the database from the Winchester is passed past those transputers, and they search then for the match.
And how big is the database?
Well, the database roughly at the moment is building up. There are 3.5 million criminals in this country, all of which have, say, 10 fingers, depending on their crimes. Each finger is a kilobyte, so we have 35 gigabytes of data that have to be searched. The system they're using today is based on some mini-computers and takes roughly 20 days, or would do, to search for that database, which is clearly impractical. With the transputer-based system, they can bring that down to a couple of hours. And by increasing, again, the number of transputers, you can get that down further.
So criminals, watch out. Where else do you see it being used?
The transputer is also very good for graphics applications. You can take a graphics image and break it up into separate parts and give each one of those parts to one transputer. Many transputers can then generate one frame, and many other transputers can then generate multiple frames, giving you real-time animated graphics.
Some of the stuff we've been seeing in the past is one giant computer just doing one particular screen and then filming it and making it look continuous. You brought some very nice illustrations of graphics along today. Let's go and have a look at them. Phil, what have you got here?
I've actually got a very powerful machine here, 22 transputers working together to generate these images.
Slow down a minute. 22 transputers, is that 220 million instructions per second?
That's right, this is very powerful.
So that's the equivalent to 2,200 IBM ATs.
Yeah, I can demonstrate that, in fact.
Just to do a picture?
Just to do a picture. It's actually a very complex picture. It's the Mandelbrot set, it's a fractal. It's very compute intensive to generate this. About 6 hours on an IBM AT, and watch this. Very few seconds.
Now, just to repaint that screen would take 6 hours on
At least 6 hours, something like 30 hours on the BBC Micro. We're about 7,200 times as fast as a BBC Model B here.
And each one of these lines here is actually being generated by an independent...
by a different transputer, and they're being combined on the graphics system.
And 22 of them all intercommunicating. We can actually see it operating on a BBC Micro to see something and compare the actual things. There it is. It's slightly different colours. No, it isn't. Well, you can also cycle the colours on this, can't you?
I can, yeah, watch this.
Go on.
It's
doing a lot of calculations now. There it goes. Well, that's very, very pretty indeed. Thank you very much, Phil.
Fascinating. And that music produced on a Sinclair Spectrum was one entry in a competition that we ran with Saturday's Superstore to find some new music to go with our visual stings. It was written by David Edwards of Claydon High School in Galston, Norfolk. But the winner was 15-year-old Wayne Middleton of Failsworth School near Oldham. He wrote and performed his piece on a Yamaha CX-5 and a drum machine. Here it is in glorious mono. Very professional piece of work. And that's it for this week, and indeed for this series. We'll be back in the autumn, so from all of us here on Micro Live, goodbye. We leave you with some more of those transputer pictures.